We turn now to the controversial pastime of Civil War reenactments that have actually grown in popularity since the 2020 racial reckoning protests and the removal of the Confederate statues and memorials. For some, these reenactments are a way to pay homage to American history, and for others, it's a shocking and insensitive reminder of America's dark past.
War reenactments are a strange and special part of American culture, but why is South Dakota getting in on them? I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and a small town in South Dakota is presenting its Canton Civil War Days in August. Only problem is that there weren't really any Civil War Days in South Dakota. The Dakotas weren't admitted into the Union until well after the Civil War in 1889. In fact, as one of the last parts of the country to have been settled, the Dakotas had barely been made into a formal U.S. territory when the war started. There wasn't a whole lot going on out there. Its population was sparse, there wasn't a ton of industry there yet, and not a lot of railroad access. It wouldn't be until after the war that the territory's population would start booming, thanks to a few different factors, including more railroads, which meant better trade routes, the Homestead Act of 1862, and the discovery of gold in the Black Hills in the 1870s. But all that to wonder, why is South Dakota flying both the Union and Confederate flags today? Is it really just a celebration or even an acknowledgement of history? And really, when will people just get over the Civil War? The Civil War is even like, why are y'all so obsessed with me? The Civil War, its purpose and its catalyst have been the source of debate in American literature, history, culture, etc. But those debates always seem to be led by those who are clearly trying to misunderstand what's in front of them. Most of us know that the Civil War was fought over slavery. However, proponents and defenders of the Confederacy argue that it was actually fought over states' rights. Yes, the states' rights to own slaves.
The guns are real, but the bullets and the dead people are not. As early as supper on Thursdays, these families will leave their modern-day lives and cell phones behind to become weekend actors in Civil War theater. And they say they haven't seen people this interested in years.
Now, here's a secret. I love historical reenactments. They might be one of my favorite things in the world. I don't tell many people that, but if I'm watching a history documentary and it's got reenactments, I am hooked. The actors are always really into it. The production value is usually not great, which is all very fun for me, but they can be surprisingly effective at reminding people that these events that took up maybe a chapter in your high school history class were real. People lived through them, and while doing so, their nation was transforming amidst wild uncertainty and fear. Each and every person living during that time was experiencing something profound, something unforgettable. Reenactments on their own, I don't think are bad. They're just another way to learn when they're utilized properly. And in order to learn, we have to confront very dark things in our past. Now, one of the reenactors told the Daily Beast in regards to the presence of the Confederate flag, "I think on a battlefield at a reenactment, it is not inappropriate to show it as long as it's not being glorified." The question is it being glorified? And is the intention behind it being there meant to be educational? If the latter, is it possible to educate people on the Civil War without having to wave a literal Confederate flag on a fake battlefield? I would say so. The flag has become a symbol of fear and hate for so many Americans, not just Black Americans, and it's become even more so in recent years when we've all seen the flag co-opted by white supremacists and Trump supporters. I can attest to this living in the South, but South Dakota is also firmly established Trump territory. For reference, McCain won the state of South Dakota by an 8-point margin in 2008. By 2020, Trump won the state by a 26-point margin. It's like you already know everything you need to know about a person who goes out of their way to fly that raggedy old flag. But it's like what they always say, it's not racist, it's culture. They never seem to put two and two together that the culture is racist, and anyone going to lengths to glorify or at least excuse a racist culture is racist. Now, to that point, Selwyn Jones, the uncle of George Floyd, told the Daily Beast the Confederate flag should literally be like the swastika is. If you display a swastika in Germany, you are automatically arrested. If you mention Hitler's name, your ass is obviously arrested. The Civil War lasted 4 years. Our country had Trump for 4 years. We've been in something of a pandemic for, let's say, close to 3 years, give or take. And in that time, we saw an insurrection at our capital, something that I think will go down as a significant event in our nation's history, even as one of our two political parties keeps trying to downplay its importance and its impact. But the impact isn't the only thing to focus on. The impact of the January 6th insurrection implies its aftermath. The lead up to the insurrection is equally as important. And this is why we study history, theoretically at least, to understand the events and, yes, the mistakes of the past, and to grow from them. When there's no understanding, there's no growth, and a nation that tries to obscure its own history is asking for trouble. For instance, we just celebrated Juneteenth, a holiday that's been fairly well known to me here in Houston for some time, but as it's been made a national holiday recently, its legacy has become more widely known across the country. Now, some haven't been too happy with Juneteenth being celebrated nationally, and honestly, there's no way to not be happy about Juneteenth becoming a new national holiday without being racist. At worst, a non-racist person would just not care about the holiday. Now, for those of you who don't know, Juneteenth celebrates not the day that the slaves of Galveston, Texas were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, but the day that they were actually freed, as in let go 2.5 years later. For 2.5 years, despite the proclamation, the slavers just didn't comply with the mandate. And that history is important. I live about 30 minutes away from Galveston, so Juneteenth has always been a big deal here in the Houston-Galveston area. For my birthday last year, which is close to Halloween, I actually did a ghost tour of a cemetery in Galveston, which, by the way, is supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the country if you're into that kind of stuff. I know I really shouldn't have been, but I was actually surprised at how many Confederate soldiers were buried there. Now, why was I so surprised? Because the culture, for the most part, has moved on. We don't really talk about the fact that we were fighting on the side of the Confederacy here. It's weird to think about Houston and Galveston as a place where slaves were once kept. I was looking into the history of one of our neighborhoods here in Houston, and I saw how much slavery dictated and influenced the land and the industry and even the culture of this place where I now live. But the thing with Houston and Galveston is that, and I don't think very many people know this, we have one of the most diverse populations in the country, however you split it. We're diverse culturally, ethnically, religiously, economically, industrially, politically. We have a little bit of everything here. Diversity breeds understanding, and it's transformative. South Dakota is decidedly not diverse with a Black population of just 2%, and I can't imagine a small town like Canton sees a whole lot of diversity. Since the first Dakotan settlers pushed the native population off of their own land, illegally I might add, South Dakota has blossomed into a primarily white, primarily Christian, and primarily conservative, deeply red state. Now either way, however you feel about what's going on in Canton, South Dakota, it's not hard to see that racism is not only rampant in this country, but it's no longer being stifled or obscured in the way that it had been prior to recent years. Confederate flags were harder to come by. You certainly didn't see them flying on the backs of pickup trucks, at least not around major cities. I broke up with a friend a few years ago who used a racial slur against Michelle Obama. Up to that point, I knew that we didn't agree on a whole lot, but I didn't know she was racist until then. And that's when things changed. Now, racist or otherwise harmful symbology and language within cultures will always be present, and it will always be controversial. We collectively need to be careful that interest or intrigue in history doesn't become worship or glory of hate.